Welcome to The Leaders Who Care, a podcast powered by Dynamis Group. We are here to give the stage and support to those committed to create a positive and lasting impact, way beyond the profits and margins, the leaders of the world who care for others and serve a bigger purpose. Join us on the journey of creating a better, more caring world. And now to your host, Marian Tamalkov.
Hello, everyone, and welcome on the episode 43 of The Leaders Who Care. We are on a mission to discover and bring some of the most caring leaders from every country of the world. And today I have the privilege to welcome a very special leader, someone who puts people first, someone who is very deeply connected to also my heart, a founder and CEO of Talent Fountain, but also an entrepreneur and a leader who puts people first and done a lot of different experiences from some of the world leading tech companies and has decided to actually spread and give back to the world. Welcome to David Bizer. David, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Marian. It's a pleasure to be here. Really excited to have our discussion.
Well, I'm so thrilled to have you today, and I really have a lot of questions to ask you. But why don't you share, first of all, a few words, a brief introduction. Who is David? Where you come from? Where are you today? And what brought you where you are? I guess you have a few, just the backstory of you.
Sure. I'll try to keep it brief. So I'm American by birth. Grew up outside of Boston and moved quite a bit around the US for my studies and for different jobs that I initially took. And I guess the story of getting to Paris is what's most interesting. I was working at Netscape. So for those of you old enough to remember Netscape, it was kind of the beginning of the internet boom in Silicon Valley. I mean, really no place I would rather be at the time. But of course, all good things come to an end. And I left Netscape, and this is not really on my CV anywhere, but I went to Arthur Andersen, if you remember Arthur Andersen.
Of course.
And I moved to Chicago to join their worldwide recruiting group. I had a mentor there, and I thought, let me see something else. Let me see something different. And less than 2 months in, I got a call from a company that was based in Austin, Texas. And they said, will you come work for us? And I said, this is super interesting because you guys were my biggest competitors when I was at Netscape. But I'm here now. I'm going to spend a couple of years. I want to learn this stuff here. But if you want to do something international, that's what I really want to do. Mm-hmm. And they called me back the next day and said, well, you can recruit for us in Paris, and that was back in 1998. Wow. When, things were just crazy and they would give people jobs that they weren't necessarily suited for in terms of experience. I'd never worked in Europe. I didn't speak any European languages, none of this. And they said, well, just go and figure it out. Right. And that's what drove me to Europe and gave me this amazing opportunity, which now I've lived here for the past 23 years. So I worked for this company called Trilogy, left Trilogy after the dot-com bust, had the call of my life, I guess. One day somebody called and said, hey, do you want to join Google, first recruiter in Europe? How do you say no to that? I mean, this is huge, right? I mean, it was 2003, so amazing opportunity. I joined Google. We were 100 people in Europe. And when I left about almost 7 years later, we grew to 5,000 in Europe. I built the recruiting organization, which was over 50 people. I mean, it was a hell of a ride. Really, really amazing experience. And then I left and did what I wanted to do for several years, which was work with startups. Got a great chance to work for one of the first startup accelerators in Europe in 2010, built out all of the kind of talent, people, recruitment, HR stuff for the accelerator and the portfolio. And then a few years later, went full on into my own business, where for the past 8 years or so, I've been working mostly with startup scale-ups across Europe, helping them identify leadership talent. So some people call that executive search. And the other job that I have, which is really my true passion, is about culture in companies and more so culture in startups and scale-ups. And so whenever I have the chance, I'm working with companies on how to identify their culture, build up their culture, embed the culture throughout the organization, because I deeply, deeply believe that now, more than ever, culture is an absolute key to success for your organization and keeping people happy and productive within the organization. So a little long, but I think you get the big picture.
American that made it in Paris. It's already an impressive statement, to be honest. It's that's awesome. What a great combination, being the bridge between these two wonderful continents, and we just missed the two other ones that are of significance that live close by from Asia and Africa. But what a great really story to hear about, from how things have worked out, and really to hear what you have done for those companies. There's so much value in what you have done in your experience, and I would like to go dive into some of those experiences, because there will be founders of businesses that may be interested in how to do that. There will be executive leaders and CEOs that are very much eager to learn how to create a culture, how to attract the best team to the organization. And there will be, of course, future leaders and young people that may want to know, do I want a career in that? So that we'll address several different groups with your experience. But I'm a CEO, and I'm very deeply passionate about the really people's work, and how do you creating a caring culture so that you can make a positive impact. I believe businesses can be great catalysts for positive impact. I even said, someone said it, business is a new church. Really, it's a lot of the values you have. It's really how you set this up is so instrumental. David, what attracts those? What attracts really not only the highest performers, but really what makes it different? What makes it special, and how people can thrive or set them up for success? So one of these, the attraction piece. The second is how do you set someone for success once you attract them? Because you can attract the high performer, but you can suffocate them. You may not allow them to really flourish in your organization. And so if you could approach it from the privilege of organization that is starting out and it's fast moving and there's a lot of things are changing, but also if you approach it from a well-established organization, what do they need to change in that sense?
So I think we're moving into a period of hyper personalization in all things recruitment and retention. And I don't think a lot of people are going to be happy to hear this, because it makes our work incredibly difficult. But the state of the market today is so frantic and ever changing and unknown that there's an incredible amount of movement and a serious amount of unknowns into what will the future look like. So today, attracting people to companies, and it's not, I mean, you can't make a huge generalization and say everyone. I'm talking about attracting people to fast-moving tech companies, startups and scale-ups. It's very much about what is that individual looking for, right? I think we're both involved in leadership recruiting at a senior level. And so for these individuals, they've been around, they have experience, and most of them have a pretty good idea of what's attractive to them and what's not. And so it's our job to figure out what that attraction is. And it could be many, many different things. You know, when I started out, I was recruiting engineers. And engineers, the attraction for engineers, for me, from what I've learned, has always been, it's about the challenge at hand. So what's the complexity of the challenge that I will be involved in? And is it complex enough to actually get me excited and motivated? There's the people who are going to surround me, incredibly important. Am I going to learn from them? One of the top things. Am I going to enjoy working for them? Is the setup, the framework for how I'm going to work at this company appealing to me, right? Because now every single company is doing it differently, right? All of the clients that I'm working with have rolled out or are rolling out some kind of hybrid, flex, full remote, 100% on-site. I don't know. It's nuts, right? It's completely nuts. So the only way to move the needle on this is to really understand what's going to attract people. And that's hard to do. You can't find out people's motivation and drivers from a LinkedIn profile. So you need to get super personal with your messages, super personal with your pitch. And it's got to be really well crafted for the individuals that you're targeting. And just a final thing on that, I've always believed that targeting is key, right? In all senses of the word. There's too many people out there who play the spray and pray game, right? Which is a lot talked about in VCs with startups, right? The VCs that just invest in thousands and thousands and then hope one works. That's a strategy. But in most cases, that doesn't work, especially in recruiting. You can't just send out 100 messages that are all the same to people you think may be a fit, but aren't really even sure. Your return in your response rate and your engagement rate is going to be very, very, very low. So you're just wasting your time. So I think this is on the attraction side about what I have to say. Now, you also talked about the retention side. So you want me to keep going there?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing. This is so relevant. And I think, get ready, guys. People are moving fast, things are changing fast. They don't want to work for often company. They want to work for themselves. So you got to get super personal to understand what they want and create an organization and a culture that actually allows that to happen in a context of really successful setup that doesn't compromise on your values. So it's not an easy task. But now, once you attract them, the other thing is how do you retain them? Because the moment you attract them and you're super successful, guess what? You will have, they will probably have the same 10 other companies trying to recruit them out of you. So, or many others. And what do you do to retain and stimulate them?
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right about all the other companies that are going to try to poach your people, because it's getting, let's say, very advanced in terms of the tactics that recruiters and recruiting organizations are using to go after people. And the ones that have a lot of resources, the big tech companies in this world, they're building entire talent intelligence units. They're building entire sourcing organizations. And these organizations are very, minutious in their research, right? They're going to map out your organization. They're going to map out your people, and then they're going to come after them with this personalized approach. So, I would say, although nobody will agree with me, recruiting today, while it's incredibly difficult, is probably just slightly easier than keeping your people. Because this is where, the rubber hits the road, so to speak, in the sense that, from day one or even prior to them joining, when they've just accepted the offer, everything that happens during their employee experience is going to factor into, is this person going to stay? And a lot of managers and leaders don't want to hear this, because it's a true buyer's market across the board. And so to the manager, it means, oh, wow, I have to do everything they want. And this isn't a happy place for a lot of people, because, it's a different way of managing. It's a totally different way of managing, to be, on top of all the people on your team. And again, I think it's super personalized. I've always thought in management that, you have to manage each person as an individual. You can't apply the same principles to everyone. But I would say that in retention, there's a couple of, let me just try to put three things out there. One, onboarding. I think the vast majority of companies highly underestimate the significance of a well-run onboarding program. And that means from the date of offer acceptance through the first several months that the company is on board. And that period of time, in Europe, a lot of people don't start jobs for 3 months after they quit their current one. So what happens during those 3 months? How is the communication dealt with to keep that person excited about their first day? What materials do you give them to prepare for that? Is everything ready for their first day? Do they come in and feel welcomed and that they're going to learn stuff right away to make them effective on the job? Do they get to meet everybody they're supposed to meet? Do people make time for them? Are people welcoming? Do they feel like they're going to belong in the company right away, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And the great thing about this today is that there are tools available. You don't have to invent it from scratch. There are a handful of great companies that are focused on onboarding. And can really help you to design a system.
Can you give us a couple of examples, David, just top of mind? We're not advertising, just we're suggesting.
Yeah. I mean, I have a bias, and so I'll give the disclaimer, but I'm an investor in a company called Workalo. It's Work, ELO. And, they're doing more than just onboarding. They're doing pre-boarding, as you call it, which is before you get to the company. They're doing onboarding when you join the company. They're doing mobility, which is a huge part of retention. We can talk about that next. And they're doing offboarding. So you can learn, which is hugely important. Why are people leaving your company? And the number of, I don't have the exact stats, but I know the number is very low. The number of companies that do offboarding or exit interviews. It's very, very low. And it's a huge, huge, huge learning opportunity. Second, if I may, let's talk about mobility for a minute. Mm-hmm. I think people underestimate the emphasis on mobility and the advantage that can bring to you as an organization. This is something that I saw firsthand at Google. At a certain period, I would say around 2006, 2007, Google recognized the need to have a very strong mobility program. And when I talk about mobility, I'm not talking just about geography, because they did it geographically and they did it very well. I can't tell you the number of people that I hired or worked with in Europe that moved to the US or Singapore or elsewhere and got these amazing opportunities to grow themselves as individuals, learning about new business cultures, business environments, trying your hand at something new. Huge. But mobility also in the sense of trying a different function. Okay, you're not stuck for life as a salesperson if you want to become a marketer. You're not stuck for life as an engineer, and you're not stuck in a particular career ladder. You can move horizontally. You can stay as a developer, but still be promoted and still get increases in responsibility and compensation. So that mobility piece, it opens up this world of opportunities. And I've seen a lot of companies that have it, but the employees don't know about it. And that's a shame, because it's something that really keeps people excited about all of these possibilities within the organization. So onboarding, mobility, and then I said I would give you three. So the last one is, very strategic, well-structured feedback loops within the organization. And, when COVID wasn't around and I used to go around to some tech conferences and speak about culture, one of the things I often asked in the audience was, how many people do weekly one-to-ones with their employees? And I was always very, very shocked to see that the number was quite low, because I think that's just a basic management principle, that you do one-to-ones every week, or at worst, every other week with your employees. And, it serves so many purposes when it's well done, when it's well crafted in terms of, getting the agenda in place ahead of time, knowing the 2 or 3 key points that you're going to discuss in that meeting, and giving the manager the opportunity to remove barriers for the employee and understand what drives them, what motivates them, what keeps them there, so that you can always have an active role in knowing where your team stands and knowing what you might have to do to increase their feeling of being engaged or belonging or what have you. So I'm going to take a drink, but I think that covers it
Wow.
At a basic level.
No, thank you so much, David. This is great to hear and share, and really there's so much from onboarding to allowing them to be mobile and having really some of those feedback sessions. What a great insights and advice that you have given to entrepreneurs or really even existing organizations that are in these shoes. What about if the organization is going through a transformation? or they're not doing well. I mean, the likelihood is that a lot of companies may struggle.
Sure.
And I think that is so important, because those high performers are very sensitive to the way you handle the crisis, the way you respond to that. What would be your advice in a situation of this kind? Because if anything, you may need to attract other talent to do this restructuring for you. So that could be, for the right people, a great challenge. That could be a traction point. So how do you turn crisis mode into opportunity for leaders? How could they look into that way and help them out to carry the necessary changes?
I think this is such a relevant question for so many people, because I feel that many companies, certainly ones that I work with, are in some state of turmoil, actually, in the sense that, they're growing so fast that things are kind of falling by the side. Communication is lacking. All these policies around flex work, where people have so many different ideas. Where I get a seat at the table is when we're talking about cultures and values. And these topics have a huge importance to how people feel engaged and belonging to the company, if they're aligned with the culture and aligned with the values. And what I've seen is that in order for these types of projects or interventions to work, you need full buy-in from the CEO and the CEO's leadership team. They have to be 100% behind any of these initiatives, or else, no matter how good you are, it's going to be very, very hard to move the needle on this, right? So I'm working with a client today on a big culture and values piece, and I'm very happy that the CEO is 100% behind it, feels incredibly connected to the values and culture, and believes that this is, what shows who we are, and makes the time. That's the thing. It's, will you make the time? Will you put your money where your mouth is, right? Everybody talks about how important the people are and the greatest asset of the organization, and building a strong culture and living our values. Everybody well, not everybody, but a lot of people talk about it. But the ones who are really making a difference are the ones who are actively investing their own resources, their own time into making that happen, right? Imagine you have a 400 or 500 person organization, and you're trying to embed the values and your beliefs, your principles throughout the organization. If you can't do that at the very senior level and get your leadership team aligned, it will never cascade down to the rest of the organization. So that buy-in and participation is huge. And then I think it comes down a lot to messaging and crafting messages that people can relate to, that they can understand, and that are repeated over and over and over again. You mentioned caring culture, and a lot of people are using that expression, and I'm not exactly sure what that means, right? In terms of, well, we're just going to generally take care of our people, or we're a little bit soft. It sounds strange to use that word, but why not? I mean, there are leadership teams that are so-called soft, in the sense that they're very supportive, very encouraging. They'll never raise their voice, that kind of thing. But there's also the exact opposite of that to a degree. And what I think is even more important than, are you in the caring culture or are you in the intense culture, as kind of extremes? It's, where do the people fit best? And I've had opportunities to work with both and everything in between, but I find the whole spectrum really, really interesting. And I do believe it goes back to this personalization thing, that some people need to work in, let's say, an ultra caring environment, and some people would rather work in a more direct, aggressive, intense environment. And that's expected, and they can't really work another way, or they're not going to be productive another way or satisfied. So I think a big part of it also is really well defining who you are, so that you can show that to people inside and outside. saying, the people who perform the best here are going to feel really connected to these values, this culture, etc. And the only way to do that is by knowing it inside and out yourself.
Thank you so much for sharing that, David. It is so relevant in many ways, and you're right. When you talk about the care culture, it's very important of what do you actually mean? How do you care? Talking straight and talking openly and direct and allowing people to express themselves and be themselves without putting a mask on is probably one of the highest form of care. So one doesn't exclude the other. You can have a disagreement, but not disrespect in that sense. So,
sure.
It's really that kind of sense. And I think when you start saying, hey, how do I take care? And I honestly believe when organizations or leaders starting to talk, I need to take care of this, and this, or I focus on our clients, they're the most important one. But in actual fact, as you progress and you grow, one of the most important roles of the leader becomes to take care of the people first. They will take care of your clients. So really starting to, and when you say take care, doesn't mean just to pamper them. It's not that. It's actually talking them straight. If they're not performing well, calling and say, hey, I've seen that your results are down. Are you okay? What's going on? Do you need some support? Is there anything I can do? Is everything, how are you feeling? Is there anything I can help you? Setting your people up for success. That to me is care, because if they're progressing, if they're really doing well, and then it's not just their performance at work, their family. I think when you have a family value and say support their family, because that's a foundation of really that joy and long-term sustainable really way of making a difference. If you have troubles at home, it's gonna impact you one way or the other, in that sense.
Sure.
So I think we can segment care in many different aspects: care of your community, care of their mental health and well-being, and you got to get all this in a way that is robust and it works. So how do you do that? With personalization, because companies won't need to have a processes, and then now you're saying, hey, we need to be super personal in the future with people. And that's true. And I'm hearing in the US with COVID, massively Generation Z and even millennials are refusing to work. So what is the future of work, David? I'm looking at 10 years ahead.
Who knows? I mean, I've been saying this a lot lately over the past couple of weeks. I honestly don't think anyone knows, and I don't think anyone really knows what we're doing to a full extent. Right. And it goes back to this discussion around flex, hybrid, full remote, full on-site, whatever. Everyone is doing something different. And everyone who's rolled out policy around this, and there's been a number of companies, large companies, that have posted their stuff, widely on social networks. I still believe at this point that they really don't know if what they've posted is going to work. Because how can you know? How can you know that this new hybrid flex thing that you've created works? Because nobody's really done it before. Okay, yes, there are a handful of remote companies that have been around for a long time, but there's very, very few examples. There are examples, but there are very few of companies that have been doing this for a long time. So how the hell do you know if it's going to work? Right? And how do we know that people, really want to be at home, or really want to be flexed, or really want to be in the office all the time? Nobody knows, because the whole year and a half that people who have never been working remote or never been working at home, they experience something that's not reality. Right? I mean, you don't have your kids at home running around every day when you work from home normally. Right? So we went through this, and we're still going through to some extent this period that no one's ever lived before. So everybody's trying to figure it out and trying different things and experimenting in different ways. The future of work for the super talented is very, very promising, because I think that people who are in extremely high demand for many years to come will have lots and lots of opportunity. Right. And so it's more a question of How do you evaluate those opportunities? Are you open to evaluating those opportunities? And make your demands. And maybe things are going to change very rapidly here, where your initial conversations with candidates are going to be around, this is how the company sees, flex work or not. This is how the company operates and manages, and this is the kind of environment that it has, and telling that stuff up front, almost first, front and center, right? I mean, I have an ongoing example of that, where I'm working with a U.S. company that wants to build out an engineering center in London. And, the questions that I'm getting asked on every day, besides the salary, by the way, which is another thing, if you want to talk about it, I think is absolutely out of control today, is the salaries are increasing like mad. And the first question from engineering leadership, if not other functions, is, well, what's the package, right? And it's not, I'm not taking that as harshly as I used to. I used to get really frustrated when people went directly to salary. I understand why they're doing it now, because they are overwhelmed with offers, and it doesn't make sense for the person to take the time to engage at all if the salary is out of range. And it's not because they're money hungry or mercenary or anything. It's just, I am evaluating 4 or 5 opportunities a week, if not more. So I've got my criteria, and this is that. And we have to be able to adjust to that as recruiting professionals.
No, absolutely. And now you're coming back to, I love what you said. The future is very promising for the super talented or for talented individuals. Young people, Generation Z or millennials listening to this podcast, or up and coming, and they're wondering, what are my talents? What I can become a super talent at? How can I really become, get into that category of super talented? What is your advice to them? Somebody starting out now, they have all the resources at their disposal. They have everything that they need to be successful, but they simply don't know what to do. Simply, they don't know what the future looks like. And a lot of them are maybe frustrated and having pressure, peer pressure, parents' pressure from every angle. How would you approach that situation? Because while they're blessed to live in the best time ever, I believe we ever lived, they are also experiencing that significant pressure on making things, and sometimes that can paralyze them to do things. They just end up doing not much, but just the days passing by. If you're starting out now, how could you get in that category of really those talented individuals that the future is so promising?
Marian, this is a very difficult question for so many reasons. And first of all, it's generational, I think, to a degree. And, I think every generation has gone through multiple phases of, I can't work with this other generation because I don't relate to them at all. Right? I've got 2 kids, 12 and 13 years old. And the way that I see them behaving in regards to technology and learning actually scares me a lot. Because one, like most children, they're on screens way too much. So is that going to be the way they learn, or are they not going to be as interested in learning as the past younger generation, whatever it's called, right? I mean, for 10 years or so, I've been going on with clients saying, one of the most important things individuals want as employees is learning opportunities. Is that still going to be the case? A lot of people talk about that all the time, right? But when I see the kids and how they function in their day-to-day, I wonder about that. So that scares me. On the other hand, I think that there are so many ways to get yourself out there and highlight yourself as one of these talented people, so-called talented people. There's the classic way that only works for a few of us, and me not included. It's the people that you see on their LinkedIn profile that they've had, and we're talking younger people here, so internships at phenomenal companies. Immediately, recruiters' eyes bubble up and say, okay, that's good. Then they look at the school and you see somebody who went to Cambridge or Oxford or MIT or whatever, and you're like, ooh, I like that too, right? Those are all like very strong indicators that this person's probably smart. Don't know, but most likely they are. But then there's everybody else. And there are a lot of talented people in the other category of, I haven't worked for a very well-known company, and I didn't go to a very, highly rated or well-known university, but I've achieved a lot in my short amount of time here on Earth, pre-career or just early career, because I have an ambitious personality, and let me show you the things that I've done that prove or highlight to you that I have this capacity, right? So one of the words that I've used and people around me have used for years and years and years and years is scrappy, right? Are you familiar with the word scrappy?
Tell me more. What do you refer? I'm not so sure.
It's a person who will do whatever it takes to get to the finish line. That's my immediate definition, right? So, take my own personal case. Hey, David, we're going to send you to Paris. You don't speak French. You don't speak anything, actually, besides English. You have never worked in Europe. You've never recruited people in Europe. You don't know shit about the European education system or how the careers work for coming out of school. And they said, well, you're going to figure that out. And so that's what I did. And I'll tell you, I worked really, really, really hard. Probably 12-hour days, probably 6 days a week, whatever. All the stuff people don't like hearing today, because that's not cool anymore, which is fine. But I did it, and I actually loved it. I also know that I had to work twice as hard as if they hired somebody from Europe, from France, spoke multiple languages, already recruited, et cetera, et cetera. But because I just wanted to make it work, and I wanted it to be successful, and I wanted to actually be recognized for making it successful, I did whatever I had to do to make it work. And that's what I mean by scrappy. It's those people who, have this strong desire inside them to build something and see it succeed and make an impact, and be able to then go back and say, I did this, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing when I started, but I made it happen. Those people are invaluable, I think, to organizations. And when I don't see those instant fits, because I need somebody super smart, so I hope the guy or the girl has studied at Cambridge. No, it's, let me see your track record. Let me see your progression. And even if you're young, you can have a track record and a progression.
I love it. And I also, that reminds me, since I hear a lot about promises, and the world is going very interestingly with politicians especially, and we hear all the promises the politicians are going to do, but you can always look at, I have obviously looked at it from the really smartest, I guess, book in the world, and what I look at is a good tree cannot give bad fruits, and a bad tree cannot give good fruit. So you recognize that by their fruit. So I love what you just said, by look at them, even if they're young and whatever, they have done something. And I same thing when I look at a politician. They come and say, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z. Great, but what have you done? Let me just see what impact have you made? How have you served so far in your life? And same with young people. They need to realize is actually to see what they care that is beyond themselves. And maybe a piece of advice for them is, if you are a taker, that means you're selfish, egoistic, super-centered careerist. You're probably not gonna be fulfilled and happy. You may get to some places, not certainly to the greatest of places you will get. So you always got to think of, hey, what else do I do? What else do I serve? What impact do I make beyond my personal well-being? Because your personal well-being is a byproduct of how you serve, in my opinion, at least. And I think a lot of young people are becoming so satisfied. They're starting to be very picky, very touchy. And that's another danger that they may face themselves, because they started to be, they can't be bothered, to do anything, and it become paralyzed. What is it there for me? But then you always got to ask this question: wherever you go, you got to show your value and say, what have I done, and what is one thing that I can be the best in the world? Well, if they have those things in place and figure this out, I think they're in a tremendous trajectory to kind of, they can get there. Doesn't mean they're there yet, but if they have determination, you have everything you need to acquire that. But super helpful, David. And now, coming down to that piece of culture. This is and the cultural piece is so important. You've seen a lot of cultures, a lot of different organizations. Why don't you share with us some of the most impressive things you've seen of different cultures? Because it's difficult to ask you a question, what is the best culture, or what is the whatever for this world? But every culture is unique and has its own pros and cons. But what are the things that you were impressed by? What are the things that you said, what a great thing to have in organization?
So I'll tell you a story about a company that I worked with for about 3 years, and it's the example of the anti-care company, if you will. I mean, I don't think they'd be happy if I said that out loud, which I just did. But I got a call from the CEO founder, and he said, I need to hire 10 people in leadership positions over the next couple of years. Can you do that for me? And of course, I gave him my pitch and I said, yeah, I can do it. And he said, well, I need to see you. You have to come here. Which for me in my business, I actually wasn't seeing a lot of my clients over the years. I was doing a lot online, and if I had the chance, I would, but it wasn't a huge priority for me. So he wanted me to come there, and I said, yeah. I mean, of course, if you want to do that, I'm totally up for it. So I flew to Oslo, and he had this startup just outside of Oslo on the side of this beautiful lake. Came up to the reception at about 9 a.m., I think. And he came down to the lobby and he said, let's go for a walk. I don't know if you've had that experience. I've had it maybe 2 or 3 times in my entire career.
I love doing, I love walking meetings simply because it moves your blood and it's a great thing to do. But that's me as well,
It's rare. It's really, really rare that people do that, especially, if you have a team and you say, hey, let's go outside and take a walk, it's fine. But that first contact, right? The first contact that you have with somebody usually is face-to-face or like this. But he said, let's go take a walk. All right. And so and we talked and we talked and we talked. We talked for about 3 hours. And then we went to lunch. The guy was super intense. I mean, like one of the most intense people I've ever worked for. And that scares you a little bit because you're like, wow, this is going to be a lot of pressure and the expectations are really, really high. But the fact that the CEO and the founder spent, 4 or 5 hours with me talking about his company and what the company is and what the company believes and how we work and expectations and where we want to go and everything, and messaging this in a way that he's obviously been doing already for years, right? His message is a mantra. And right away, you understand the company, which gives you a huge advantage in being able to pitch for it or as an employee to work there, right? Because you know who you are. And they spent, I don't know how much time, but putting together some kind of a culture book. It's probably 75 pages, 80 pages. It doesn't have tons and tons of text, but it has some. But it's incredibly clear about this is who we are, this is what we believe, this is how we operate, this is the journey that we're on. And what it allows for is for people to self-select into that company by looking at that and saying, this is 100% the place for me, or hell no, I'm going to run away from this as far as I can. Because it's so clearly well defined, you can make that decision. And I think when we're talking about culture, to have that kind of messaging and mantra and repetition of all that is one of the best things that you can do to make sure people are aligned. And how do I prove to you that everybody in that company was aligned? Because I created this thing some years ago called the culture audit, where you go into the company and you talk to, 12, 25 people, depends on the size of the company. And you ask them questions about, why did you join the company? Why do you stay at the company? What do you think about the management? What do you think about the culture? Blah, blah, blah. Every time I do it, the answers are all different, but not at this company. At this company, all the answers were the same. Incredibly rare to see that kind of an alignment. So again, the company, you could think, wow, that's a crazy place. It's intense. One of the things the CEO says is, if you join this company, you're going to be working 150%, right? There's no work-life balance. You want work-life balance? That's after you've done the 150%, right? A lot of people don't want to hear that today, but there are people who thrive off that. And that company just raised $250 million a couple of weeks ago and are definitely on the way to being the leader globally in their space. And it's fascinating. Absolutely.
That's what a great story. What you're saying here about culture is, guys, be specific. Be really authentic of who you really are. I know people got to know, and you're right. Not everybody will relate to the culture. Others, and to be honest, what you just said, David, actually, it's a form of care. I mean, that kind of the leader is giving really a clear vision, and he's a visionary and have a specific way how things are and the values and so forth. So to be honest, that level of transparency is to me a form of care, because people know what they're signing up for. And if that is consistent throughout, I think it's you better know it now. And as we say in executive search recruitment, you better know before somebody sign up for something than resigning 3 months later.
Absolutely.
So I think it's a great, in a way, a great example. Thank you for sharing that story.
And of course, my pleasure.
In that sense, and wish good luck to the company that you mentioned, and that's great to hear, because I think way to serve the world, you got to make certain you got to really perform, you got to really develop. I mean, clearly there is a way that you can do things, but you got to be tested, in that sense of whether you can collectively achieve as good, if not better, results without necessarily working the longest hours. That's to be put to the test. I don't know whether working that long hours versus working as a team, because I also have a different vision sometimes, saying, when was one of the greatest times of our history was during the Renaissance. The Renaissance was a great time where there was not a lot of pressure in terms of wars. There was peace. And people were gathered together over different disciplines to invent, to create. And they were given that peace of mind. There's no wars, there's money available. Just go and do things in that. So I also believe that there is it doesn't mean you shouldn't work long or hard, in that sense. But I think also that when there's that peace of mind and your brain is in that safe place at the same time, can create a lot. It can create also under pressure. During the war times, we can see that a lot of creations came out of it, on the other side as well. So I think it's a very, very interesting example that you gave about culture. And we have a great question from somebody that you know well and is a fan of yours. This is Mr. Yankov. Stoyan is David, great insights. Can you share some strategies on how can a leader really start this process of defining the values and culture, and practical tool strategies, exercises you can share would be great.
Sure. So you want me to give you my toolbox?
Sure.
But, just kidding. I mean, first and foremost, I think that if you have the opportunity to work on this early in the life cycle of your company, then that's your best bet. And I think one of the best examples of this is a company called Buffer. I've been citing them for years. It's just a very interesting case study. You can go search Buffer culture and you'll see the history of it and how they worked on it from the very beginning. I mentioned it earlier in the episode that you need leadership, CEO buy-in, and full support, right? If you don't have that, you're not going anywhere. So, that needs to be very, very clear. And that's at any size of the operation, right? So when I think there's there's probably multiple, what do I want to say? There's multiple ways to structure this depending on the evolution of your company. So if you really are at the beginning, the thing that I talked about that I do is the culture audit. I'm able to go into a company and do these interviews and come out and give you kind of a state of the union on what the real culture is like today in your company, based on the feedback from all these people. Whether you have an established set of values and something structured and written about your culture or not, the audit tells you where you are. So either you take that and you go from there and build on top of it and build out your values and your culture in a structured and thoughtful way, or you already have that and you learn what's missing. Okay, so if you don't have the culture or the values yet, you get this strong base going, and then you have to invest a lot of time into it. Right? I mean, there's nothing more than I can tell you, right? You need to, if you don't have it in place, you have to sit around the table as a leadership team for hours and hours and hours talking about this, right? What do we value? How do we want to be perceived? How do we operate? How do we behave, et cetera, et cetera? My 3 things for culture have been for a long time. How do you make decisions? How do you behave? And how do you communicate? And I feel like you can link those 3 things to everything. So if you define those areas, then you're well on your way. It's a lot of work. Google, right? When Eric Schmidt joined Google, I think it was in 2001 or so. One of the things that he did with Larry and Sergey, every Sunday, yes, you heard that right, Sunday, they would go to Subway. I don't know why they chose Subway. I think that's disgusting. But they would go to Subway and spend hours talking about what is Google? What do we want Google to be? How do we want people to feel working here? They spent hours and hours and hours weekly talking about that. I mean, it's serious stuff. And I don't think a lot of people grasp that in terms of the time that they need to put in. So in terms of tools and processes and resources, there isn't one single here build your culture or create your values, but there are lots and lots of examples. So there's people like me who do it, as a consultant. I think there are some companies who will offer you things, that are maybe better packaged. But I think examples for inspiration can also help you get on this journey. I think one of the better pieces of inspiration for something like this comes from Twilio, and the CEO describing what he did to kind of amplify the values by getting together a culture committee or a values committee or whatever, different people in the organization, and really deep diving into, again, who we are and doing a bottom-up approach to seeking input on this. So there's so many different things, so many different processes and possibilities. The number one thing is just do it. Make sure that it's happening and get people involved. And let me just leave you with this thought on this topic, because I've recently started this, we're calling it a culture council for now. I wish I had a better term for it. But the first meeting of the culture council that I kind of designed as an external consultant, I wasn't that happy with it. I felt like people don't really understand why they're here and what we're trying to achieve. So we had the second one. And for the second one, I started out the meeting and I said, let me just go over again and in a little bit more depth what we're doing and why you're here and why I hope you want to be here. And I tried to make it as clear as humanly possible in terms of what I think this group can achieve. A group of people who represent the organization from all different areas, geographically, functionally, seniority, et cetera, And I just got feedback today by one of the people who was in the meeting, and they said everybody gets it and everybody's excited to be here. And you couldn't hope for anything more than that, right? So a lot of times it's about understanding what you're trying to communicate and verifying or validating that what you're communicating is getting through to people, because that's the one of the biggest communication gaps in culture throughout all enterprises, is that the managers or the leadership deeply believe that they're communicating well. And the people who they're communicating to deeply believe that they're communicating like shit. And it's a natural happening because people think that they communicate well, and people think that they communicate well enough that people understand. But we are receiving too much communication these days. We're overloaded with information. It is impossible to remember things, right? Everything goes in one and out the other, and only the very, very, very important stuff stays. Hence, the need for massive repetition and using multiple channels to communicate within the organization so people start to get it. Like the guy at the company that I say is a little intense. He had a mantra and he never stopped talking about it.
I love it. Well, David, this has been what a great and insightful discussion. I just could be so grateful and thankful for spending the time and sharing so openly. I know this is years of experience, and you've worked with some of the most disruptive companies and world-class leaders to share those insights. So we are very thankful, and you've addressed so many different groups, from entrepreneurs, CEOs to the future leaders, Generation Z, and really a lot of practical advice, really a lot of great comments from many different really people that are listening, and some of them that you may know also just mentioned. This is gold from Usman Gondal. So thank you to Usman. He's a fan. Stoyanos is grateful, but many others. So we are really grateful, and that's our mission, to bring those leaders from around the world that care and make a difference, that make the world a better place. And now we had a chance to discover what you've been doing, David, and how you've served. Final question, and this is related to care culture, and what has care played or made a difference to your success?
For sure, because especially about how you defined it earlier, when I was saying, this caring thing is a little bit soft, la la la, and then you redefined it, and I think you did it really, really well in terms of putting expectations in place and setting a good structure so people know what this is all about. And so I'll go back to a manager that I had at Google who I have tremendous respect for and a lot of admiration. And she was somebody who, by all means, was difficult to work with because she was very aggressive, very ambitious, and laser focused on productivity and success and making a difference. So for some people that was really hard because it was intense, right? And at times it was really hard for me, but I feel like she figured me out as an individual, like we were talking about personalization earlier. And I think she figured out pretty quickly that I liked to be pushed and that I liked to be overextended and that I would perform better being pushed and being overextended. And that's how she managed me. And I know that she got more out of me than another manager could because she got that, right? And I think that's what it all goes back to when you talk about personalization and personalized management. If you've got somebody else on your team with an intense, aggressive, ambitious manager and they're, not fully receptive to that, you have to change your style or you're going to lose that person, right? And so the awareness around that is absolutely critical.
Well, thank you so much for really sharing those, David. Keep spreading that message and care culture and inspire more people to make the world a better place in every possible way. And we're very excited to have great leaders like you on the podcast. Watch out for the next one that's coming as well. Next week will be tremendous. We'll be joining all the way from Tokyo, so it will be wonderful. And with my colleagues Stoyan Yankov will host them. But David, I'm grateful and thank you so much for spending the time. Spread positivity and care, and God bless you and your family.
Thank you so much, Marian. It was an absolute pleasure to talk with you. I've had a great time, lots of fun, and I hope we get to do this again.
Thank you so much.
Take care.